All right, so let me ask for your attention once again, please. We are going to have our main speaker start in a minute, but let me also say that one of the things that I have appreciated the most about this event has been the novel, new, and hopefully continuing participation of the glass artist community that many of you have met during talks, during panels, etc. And I will say that we are, I think, very lucky that we have made that connection, and also extremely lucky as I think about the way that people express their feelings about glass. I think we're extremely lucky, frankly, to work in a material that lends itself so well to our intellectual side, which for many of us, of course, who work in science is very fulfilling. But also, I don't know of many other folks with work with materials that can almost be described as spiritual. From stained glass windows in churches, glass has always provided an added dimension to the human experience that I don't think many folks can actually claim for almost anything else. And I like the fact then that our colleagues in art have actually brought some of that to our interpretation and to our celebration of glass here in this National Day of Glass. All right, so I think you will understand maybe even more about what I'm just saying when you hear our next speaker, Narcissus Quagliata. I had the pleasure of actually meeting virtually Narcissus I guess it was a few months ago now, via phone first and then via Zoom, and I was also had the pleasure to work with him on a webinar a few weeks ago. And I think you're in for a treat tonight. It's both, again, a visual and intellectual treat. Let me go ahead and just read what it says here in our little bio. So Narcissus Quagliata is considered one of the most significant contemporary artists in glass in the world, I would say. He has defined a new pathway for the art of glass and is best known for spectacular artworks in public spaces that have drawn worldwide attention. The Dome of Light, Wind, Fire, and Time is the largest illuminated glass dome in the world. It is situated in the central station of the Kaohsiung Rapid Transit Metro system and is a landmark that has become a major international tourist destination in southern Taiwan. His captivating glass dome for the entry rotunda in the ceiling of the Basilica of Santa Maria degli Angeli e dei Martiri, a structure built by Michelangelo in the Roman ruins of the Baths of Diocletian. This crown of glass is known for using light to make manifest the movement and alignment of celestial bodies, a masterpiece that combines science and art, which I'm sure he'll show you. His fine artworks in glass and his watercolors have been collected in museums and private collections worldwide. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce my friend Narcissus Quagliata and to let him, frankly, wow you with his work. Thank you.
Mario, I have two of my books.
Oh, thank you.
It's really a pleasure to be here. And I made some notes before I actually give you the lecture. I have a few thoughts that came to me spontaneously by attending this conference. So I have been absolutely fascinated by the scientific talks here. Oh, I have a note. I want to thank Mario and I want to thank Kathy, and which I don't want to skip thanking the people I should be thanking, and the whole committee for the National Day of Glass and the Ceramic Society. So please, I put one piece of paper over the other. So I don't want to feel. So I have been sort of collecting some thoughts, some overview thoughts. One, because I've been absolutely fascinated by the scientific presentations. The presentation on fusion, on optics, very enriching for me. And I've also enjoyed so much the presentation for the collection of the Corning Museum. I have, however, something to say about it. Everything that has been talked about is useful. And so I find myself in the odd position of sort of saying, look, what do scientists do? Well, they are insatiable in their curiosity, and they find the structure of life and matter with verifiable proof. Amazing. I find the business people here equally amazing because they have continuously dealing with innovation, and then they have to bring it into the world, make it happen, and balance the books. You know, so I find that staggeringly mature. People of substance. And so I ask myself, what do you bring? What drives you? And I've been asking myself this question the whole time that I've been here. And I've decided that, to be completely honest, what drives me is frivolity. In other words, the unabashed love of life for no reason at all. That is kind of what my life has been about. So I want to go on to the actual, my actual lecture, but I want to say one thing more, which is, you've been dealing through all the lectures with things, useful things. The latest invention in pharmaceutical packaging, the ancient jars blown in the Roman Empire. I don't deal with things, I deal with images. The kinds of images that perhaps could be good for the soul, but have no other use, really. So again, frivolity enters the picture over and over again. So having made those comments that came to me, you know, these thoughts really came to me as I was sitting here preparing. So the actual opening statement before I start showing you material is this. We all know, we've talked about it plenty of time, that in the last 100 years, glass has changed everything. And certainly glass in architecture has completely changed the way we perceive space. So if, you know, I come from Italy, so I know what old buildings feel like. All of Rome, where I was born, is, you know, old. and all my friends in my high school, they all lived in buildings that were built somewhere between the 1500s and the 1800s. And it's totally different relationship to what glass would do. Okay, then we're talking about another thing, which is, we've talked about fiber optics and the screens, how you could go 17 times over and back from the sun with fiber optic cable that we have on our planet. Okay, so now we are completely communicating on the whole planet, and we live in completely different spaces. But the real issue is our relationship to light has completely changed. In other words, Venice was a dark place before electricity. Today, we look, how many hours a day do you look at a screen? That's direct light. So we are actually conditioning ourselves and our nervous system to something completely different. And we're not really aware of it. So that is the foundation of my talk and what I'm going to show you as a thought. Now let's come to art. I'm a painter. I love painting. And painting has essentially stayed the same. From the time it was done in caves, it went from caves to frescoes in aristocratic palaces, and then it went into oil paintings that could be more suited for bourgeoisie. Then it went into museums. But essentially, a painting is a painting. It's a very opaque surface on which light bounces off. So I'm trying to get you to focus on our perception of reality. So the whole thing about tonight for me is that the perfect painting must be made with glass. In our age, the perfect painting must be made with glass. That's what I believe. I believe that glass has reached a level of development where if you see a beautiful glass piece and you see light through it, that is a more contemporary experience. Because of what I said, we're used to seeing light all the time. So glass comes in, but glass is not the subject. Light is the subject. So I want to tell you a tale of 30 years, and there's 3 protagonists, myself and 2 people that are in the room here. And it has to do with my obsession that you should be able to make a painting with glass. It's not simple, but it can be done. Today, I believe that you can make any painting with any style with glass, not on glass, with glass, which is an entirely different thing. So, in a way, this comes at a critical moment because I just released my first of 6 courses on how to do this. And it's a course online, and it's trying to get 30 years of my effort into teachable and absorbable and digestible quantums. But I want to tell you, I will present them more at length, but I want to tell you that this is a story of an artist, a glass factory, and a studio in Los Angeles. So I'm the artist, you know me. The glass factory is the Bullseye Glass Factory, and in Portland, Oregon. And I will tell you how that relationship developed. And the studio is the Judson Studio in Los Angeles. At critical times, during this learning curve, that it's reaching a peak right now, these 2 companies have made a massive investment in my vision. So I want to take this opportunity to thank them because I think both companies took a big risk. And I really appreciate the risk they took in supporting my effort and making it happen. Otherwise, nothing would have happened. So the last thing I want to say is glass is a very hard material to work with, extremely difficult. And so the point that I'm making is that when it was the right moment, and I will show you here, I have some documentation. All of this information kind of in a very chaotic way entered in my life. And the effort, you know, I thought, you will see some huge projects I did, which took 5 years to make. And I'm in the middle of trying to externalize all this knowledge and make it available for other artists and the future generations. And it is incredibly difficult. In other words, the fact that you know something doesn't mean that you know how to communicate it. And so I'm at high seas right now. I released the first chapter, which is called Transforming the Glass. And then there will be others, Making an Image, and others, all of the optics of the glass and all this. And I'm about to start showing you the images, but since we saw Pilchuck, I wanted to tell you that all of this was possible because Dale Chihuly invited me to Pilchuck 20 times, and I taught there for 20 summers. And even though Pilchuck is dedicated to making things, my presence there allowed me to see, by watching great artists and great glassblowers like Lino Tagliapietra. When he came the first time, I was the only person he could talk to because nobody spoke Italian. So we got to know each other because he had no choice. You know, in Italy, this would not happen. A Venetian would not speak kindly to a Roman. But at Pilchuck, it was neutral ground. But I learned how glass works at Pilchuck, watching great glass blowers, and that is the knowledge that I took and started my journey to learn how to make a painting with glass. So the first part of this is going to be me introducing myself with 2 projects. The second one has a lot to do with science, and then we're going to go through the relationship between Bullseye and the birth of a language. One last thing I forgot to say. My scientist friend, Salvador Cuevas, from the University of Mexico, who did the project in the Michelangelo building with me, told me something that I will never forget. He said there is 2 types of photons: the salvage photons and the domesticated photons. And he said, it's like a wolf and a dog. You know, it's like, and I never forgot that because a lot of what I do has to do with the wolf and some of it with the dog. So let's start this. So let me, some of you are far away, so this is going to be divided in 2. The Sun in the Basilica and the Dome of Taiwan will come first, and then a collaboration in the creation of a new language for glass, A Tale of 30 Years. The players are myself, the Bullseye Glass Company. You'll meet through a small video Dan in a few minutes, and the Judson Studio in Los Angeles. David Judson is right at the end of this hall. So these are my 2, I did about 70 projects in my career. And these are the 2 most relevant ones. So, Wind, Fire, and Time, the Dome of Light over the Formosa Boulevard metro station in the city of Kaohsiung. A new identity for an industrial city and a new landmark and tourist destination for Taiwan. Okay, when I went to Kaohsiung, there was nothing that was there for decoration. Nothing. It's like I was staggered. It was an industrial city. Everything had a use. Even the biggest boulevards had, of course, big signs by Prada, Armani, of course they were selling you something. So I noticed in this city that there was nothing that was done just because you do it. And coming from Rome, where most of the things are like that, where you have statues, you have squares, you have places where you enjoy yourself, I could not imagine that environment. So my task was to invent something that people would be proud of. And I like to show this image because this is the dome before we installed it. And I want to get you to take a look at how big it is. It's huge. It's 1,152 panels. And I had to argue for a year and a half. And they didn't want to change the station. I argued that it needed a much bigger space. And eventually the Minister of Transport in Taiwan fell in love with my work. And, oops, I have to, something happened here. Let me just one second, one moment of patience. Okay. So I finally achieved the size that was needed, and then I proceeded to do the work that was done in Germany. It was done in Germany at the Derek Studio between the year 2004 and 2007. It's a dream. It's a dream for the entire city. And it is instead of doing a very big abstract thing, I decided to talk about everything. Life, death, sex, pain, love, and femininity, the moon. It's crammed with symbols, and it's crammed with feelings. And I knew that I had succeeded when the guard that was guarding the place before the inauguration, I asked him to give me a tour so that he could tell me what he saw. And he got it right. I mean, he had the right feeling about it. He told me, this is what's happening in this piece. But I love to show this slide because you get a sense of the scale. It's amazingly big. And it was a real pleasure. I mean, as somebody born and raised in Rome, I've always wanted to do something like this. I mean, Rome is filled with things like this, you know? It's like, and I want you to know that before I designed this and after it was installed, I visited the Sistine Chapel to thank Michelangelo. Because I said, help me, help me, help me. It's sort of like all the human emotions, where's my pointer? All the cosmic emotions are up here, the sun, creativity, we could go back, and this is the moon, the sea, femininity, and many of the great cosmic life, a man falling, life, conflict, a fight, two fighters exploding in flames, and a phoenix flying out, and pain. There is 80 figures in this, so I'm just going to show you very few. But very apropos, I did a part, sadly these days, on war and famine. and grief, the figure of grief. And you can kind of see the war scene behind, and there is a self-portrait which is about 16 inches tall, and I'm sort of puzzled by the scene behind me. The sea, the beauty of the sea, the way I used to see it at Capri when I was a child, like going underwater and looking up. Dream, meditation, dance. The inauguration was done with the president of Taiwan, and a dance group choreographed at the opening ceremony a whole work, a dance work inspired by the figures in the dome. So it was very moving. And there is the president of Taiwan, the ambassador from Italy, Germany, the United States, and the chairman of the board of the metro system, et cetera, et cetera. I was pleased that last year, after almost 10 years, 8 years, Taiwan published a stamp. And so I had nothing to do with it. Because they told me, and they sent me 3 or 4 sheets of stamps, and it felt good, you know. I knew that I could do that. In other words, I knew that if I did everything the way I envisioned it, that might be the result. But I had to jump through a lot of hoops. I had so many people from Corning here that I had to tell you, I threw in 3 images because this is the Centerway Bridge, and I want you to know that probably before some of you were born, in 1983, I did a proposal with Arthur Cotton Moore, an architect from Washington, D.C., for doing a new museum on the Centerway Bridge. And I remember I did the presentation, the chairman of Corning loved it, and then I got the news that this is my model. It was going to be like imagining snow over the whole thing. But he said it would be too expensive to heat it in winter and too expensive to cool it in summer. So the project was scrapped. Now, this is a very special project for me. This is, to me, I still can't believe it happened. I mean, I'm from Rome. The Ministry of Culture doesn't let you touch anything in Rome. I mean, the last time something was touched that was a national monument, probably was 50, 60, 70 years ago. So the likelihood that this happened was absolutely minimum. I thought that I had a better chance winning the lottery than getting this job. But I was asked to do it, and it did come through. So, time, light, entangled in the perceivable movement of celestial bodies. The Dome of Santa Maria degli Angeli, the Martiri in Rome, Michelangelo's last architectural work. He remodeled it, he didn't build it. So light as an artistic medium has been at the core of my career. I mean, ultimately, the thing that interests me is light. And you'll see why a little bit later, but this is me on the scaffold underneath when we were installing. And of course there is a rainbow spectrum. The bricks behind me were put there in the year 205. And And just my task was I saw my task as a way to just bathe the whole rotunda with light, with spectrum light. And then there's an additional thing. So you can kind of see that some of the elements, some of the crystal glass that I put into the dome, which you'll see in a second, actually spreads the light everywhere in this rotunda. The building, you can't appreciate this project unless you understand the building. The building, this is a maquette in the Museum of Rome, and it shows the city of Rome in the year 220. And that was the baths of Diocletian. It's a area that when built, it was like 4 acres of built buildings. So with time, the baths were built. The story is horrendous. It was built by 40,000 Christian slaves that were then killed after the building was done. And that was just 10 years before Christianity became legal by Emperor Diocletian. Constantine made it legal. So take a look. This is how the building actually looked if you took a section. It's a huge space. It was the baths. It was the biggest baths in Rome. And that's where everybody went to get cleaned up. It was a law that you have to go to the baths in Rome to keep the place from diseases. So that is the collapsed entry, but this is the way the building looked like 1,200 years later when Michelangelo was asked by Pius IV to please do a monastery and a church and a basilica there. So that's how he got it. The same thing you saw, but gives you a sense of the magnitude of this. So this is the entry to the basilica now. What I showed you, the corner of that space was this, which is a church, but it was actually built on Roman walls. The corner of the main building was this. Everything else collapsed, but the main nave did not collapse. Michelangelo designed a courtyard right there. It's very famous, it's beautiful. And it's in the Museo delle Terme. And it's an amazing building. So you can imagine the entryway, which is over the place where I put my project, right there. This is the plan view. This is discussed by Vasari, the famous writer that wrote the stories of the artists. And Vasari says that everybody was shocked because everybody expected Michelangelo to put the entrance here in the main nave, and instead he put it here, which was where the Tepidarium is, which is the pool in the baths, which was neither hot nor cold, tepid. So here is Michelangelo's drawings with his assistant, the section. My dome went there. And this is a cleaner section from the 1700s. And here we actually look at this journey. So this is the actual piece. The crystals, this is not green glass, and it's beveled to the exact angle that my scientist friend told me to do it. And then it's curved. So here's a close-up. Take a look at the center, which is 3 concentric spheres, which are, of course, the abstract symbol of the Trinity. Those were done at Pilchuck by Billy Morris in, that would be 1999. And we did a session, and we blew the spheres. We had to do two, we had to cut them, we had to assemble them. It was like putting a Saturn inside a Saturn inside a Saturn. And this is the crew that did it. My son is to the second from the left. Billy was very, very wonderful. He made time to do this. And here is a close-up of that center set of spheres. Now we go to the collaboration with science. So when I got this project and it became real, because I didn't believe it was going to be real, when I finally understood that I was going to do this, I went to my scientist friend from Mexico City and I said, look, you are a telescope builder. He works with the European telescopes in Canary Islands and all this. I have one entry of light in this space. What can we do? I mean, let's do something, you know? And he says, well, as a Mexican, I could tell you that in Rome, the sun never reaches the zenith. So how about if oh, by the way, and there is a tradition in this church which the Gregorian calendar was based on. There is a meridiana, which is a sundial, which was used to try to readjust the calendar by Gregorius the Seventh, I think. So there is already an astronomical instrument in the church. There's simply a tiny little hole. And then there is full of mosaics and things. There's this long line through the main nave that defines the times of the year, winter, summer, etc. So based on that, Dr. Salvador Cuevas suggested that he could design 3 lenses that would deviate the rays of the sun and shoot them down into the basilica, into the rotunda, and that they would be in the center at noon, at solstices and equinoxes. So that's what we did. And he kept his word. I have to tell you that he was in shock because when we installed them, he started trembling because it wasn't happening at noon. And then he forgot that it's a daylight savings thing. So I have never seen, when we installed them and the time came, the man was shaking. I mean, and then, you know, he thought about it and he looked at his books and everything, and you realize that this is because it's daylight saving. It will be at 1 o'clock, but it's the astronomical noon in Rome. So that is the concept, and these were the lenses. They were done with shot glass that we ordered from Germany, and then his lab in Mexico City produced the lenses. They're perfect. Absolutely perfect. And here we are with Salvador Cuevas installing the lenses. And here's one of them. This is the diagram of what the light does in the lens to deviate it from the angle to shoot it down in the... So here is the sun. Now, there is a question here. This is not a spot of light. This is the sun in focus. So when there is sunspots, you can see them with the naked eye. And so here I am sort of tracing the movement of how it's going to move. I'm close to the center. I mean, the center of the rotunda is here. Obviously, it was a few days off. That's where the rotunda center is. But basically what I'm trying to tell you is when this happens from Earth, looking at the sun, which is a solar eclipse, This happens in the Basilica. You can see, it's got a lot of marble on the floor, so, you need a sheet of regular paper this size. So you can tell what the size of the sun is because it almost goes from edge to edge here. Okay, now, when this happens, which is Venus is crossing in front of the sun, this happens in the Basilica. And it's a little bit smaller than a penny. If the disc is like this, and you can sort of figure. It was scary that day because it was a cloudy day. And as you can see, the clouds were moving, and it was like one of those Roman days with a lot of wind, and there's clouds, and there's no clouds, and there's clouds, and I mean, we were just like, this is not going to happen for another 100 years. And we were not we were very nervous. But anyhow, that I feel is one of the achievements. But since I pulled this out, since there is so many scientists here, I want you to know that the Pope wrote a phrase for this dome, and it's called, and it has to do with science. And so the Pope sent me this phrase to etch on the dome, and it says, La scienza ha radici nell'immanente ma porta l'uomo verso il trascendente. Science has roots in the immanent, which is reality, but takes humankind to the transcendent. A small note of interest. When we were etching it, I almost killed one of my craftspeople because he was misspelling transcendent. And he said, no, maestro, I'm doing it just the way the Pope wrote it. And surely enough, the Pope had made a spelling mistake. So I had to grind the whole operation to a halt because I would not correct the Pope, but I didn't want to etch an error forever in his name. So I had to get in touch with his secretary and tell him what my problem was. And those were the fax days. And then one day, 2 days later, I get the fax from Bishop Stanislaw with all of the seal and all of that. It's very impressive to get something from the office of the Pope, from the secretary of the Pope. And it says, correct the mistake. So the mistake is actually here. There shouldn't be an N there. Trascendente is without an N. And so we corrected it, and if you notice, right here, there is no N. But that was, so on the last thing on this particular cycle, before we change tune altogether, I want you to know that I have always wanted to do a project where I would create a sphere. A sphere would be created, and actually this is an old design, because today I would do it differently. I wanted, based on my experiences on the Rome piece, I felt that the art was not that interesting. The real interesting thing is the light. And so after doing the kind of stuff that you saw in the Basilica, I wanted to create a sphere, and I wanted to put, actually there I imagined doing a stained glass, but today I would not do a stained glass. I would just put optical things that would create all kinds of artwork made with light all over the sphere, with all kinds of ways of projecting it. I was close to getting it done. In the city of Kaohsiung, I had a major sponsor. The the Southeast Corporation, and they were going to build at the entrance of the port this sphere, but it was not to be. The gentleman passed away, and so did his wife, within a matter of 6 months. So they were young, they were 60 years old, they were younger than me. And so that project went by the wayside. It almost got built in Perth, Australia, because the mayor loved it. Her name was Scafidi, Lisa Scafidi, and but it's something that I still dream about doing. A piece where the glass, where the art is the light, only the light, and the glass provokes the light into the art piece. Okay, now we go to the main fare of this presentation. Okay, I'm going to present now the Bullseye Glass Company, and I'm going to use Dan's own words to present it. I tried to make a presentation, and then I realized that he has a much better one on the internet, and so there is a minute presentation of one of the major and important players of this story. So let's hope that
I'm Dan Schwer, one of the owners and founders of the company, which we started in 1974 here in Portland, Oregon. Yeah, the factory really is a mixture of everything from 17th century glassmaking processes to 21st century electronic controls. But the basic forming of the glass is done the way it was done hundreds of years ago, by simply ladling a gobble glass onto a rolling mill and rolling it into a sheet. So that hand individual attention is what really makes our glass what it is. It's not machine made, it's handcrafted.
Okay. Now I want to introduce the Judson Studio. So you couldn't get two institutions or two companies that are further apart in everything. So the Judson Studio was started and funded in 1897. David Judson, who is here, is the 5th generation owner of this company. And this is the building in Los Angeles, which is actually, it can't be torn down. It's, how do you call it, when it's a national treasure? It's a city monument, number 62 in Los Angeles. And when I spend my 6 months in LA, my apartment is on the upper left side. And this is the old building, which I think was built around the 1920s. And this is the new, the left side is the new facility, which was built based on the fact that we needed kilns and many other things, as I will say in a few minutes. But there is now a 3rd facility, which he's gotten into, and so there's a lot of movement. But everything is anchored on a tradition of 125 years. So I just want to show 5 images. This is Frederick Wilson from the 1930s. This was done by his great-grandfather. I hope I'm correct, but I think it is so. And you can see that this is a company that did traditional stained glass of the highest quality. This was done in 1915 by his great-grandfather too. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it's in the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. Beautiful works, just beautiful works. His grandfather in the 1960s did all of the glass work in the chapel for the Air Force Academy. So there is thousands of square feet of glass there, and he's actually has this work back in the studio for cleaning, and so his grandfather's work right now is in the studio getting clean for reinstallation, since they're doing the whole building over. And it's also a company that has worked with Frank Lloyd Wright. I think it's his great-grandfather did the Ennis House, and I just basically wanted to say this is a company which is an amazing company with a lot of tradition and a solid family with a glass business that was very much a West Coast thing. So I took a picture, I'm showing this picture of the new studio recently to give a different feel for the way the studio is. And this is David. So I put the picture so you could recognize him and you can go talk to him. And so now we go on to the actual heart of what I want to say. Okay, stained glass and its method of fabrication have stayed essentially the same for 800 years. There's been all kinds of style changes, but the methodology and the reason why stained glass windows are built that way is very straightforward. You can't mix the colors without getting them, when you cool them, the glass fractures. So if you'll notice, a typical stained glass window has all the colors separated. The blue is a blue. Now you can do something on that color. You can put some black, and you can define what you want. But take a look. All the colors are separate. And why, as I said, is because they could not mix them. So what was the solution in the Middle Ages? You created a metal H and you glazed them together. So essentially, a stained glass window is a mosaic of glass, with each piece being a color. Now, take a look at the fact that the pieces are fairly simple to cut. And take a look at the fact that, two more things, it's very difficult to put it together and very laborious. And in this particular case, all of the lead is the same in the width. So it is a functional, the lead is a functional thing. So I studied painting, I graduated with a master in painting. I fell in love with stained glass for the reason I said at the beginning. It's the light. You can't compare. The reason was I saw a Chagall painting and a Chagall window next to each other in the Museum of Modern Art when I was 19 years old, and I felt that, hands down, the stained glass was so much more powerful. You know, it just overwhelmed you with feeling, and you looked at the beautiful painting he did, and it touched you, but it was not the same thing. So, given that I was attracted to glass, and the studio glass movement was just beginning, I got involved in stained glass. But between 1972 and 1992, I did many art pieces. But I want you to see what I did, which is I decided that the lead would become very fluid and a graphic element. So instead of being this chunky functional thing, holding a mosaic up, the lead had to be as if you did it with a sumi brush. And the glass had to be very pure and blown antique glass. This piece is in the Corning Museum. It's one of the earliest pieces I sold to a museum. As you can see, there's also something else which is novel, not just how I use lead, but how I treat the subject. I mean, everybody looks at a stained glass window and you feel you're going back 100 years. You know, why? There's no reason. The technique is there. You could actually do it. This is the lawyer for Frank Sinatra flying in his own plane. He gave me a ride from LA to San Francisco, and I decided to make a stained glass window of it. So here he is, very casual, very early 80s. You know, and this piece here is in the Renwick Gallery, not far from here. Again, it's one of the pieces I call my Mediterranean treasures. But we're not looking at my art for the content. We are looking at my art for how it's made during this lecture. So this piece here, too, it's got lead work you don't see inside the figure of this Japanese Buddhist monk who taught me meditation. This piece was acquired by the Metropolitan Museum in '81. This piece, which is probably one of the most favorite I've ever done, is called Porca Miseria, which is damn misery. And it's a portrait of the homeless person that lived outside my studio in San Francisco for 2 or 3 years. And again, this piece is in the Oakland Museum, ironically in the decorative art section. And of course, I don't see what's so decorative about a homeless person. But because it's glass, it's got to be in the decorative art section. So even if you do an existential statement on homelessness, it's glass. So it's going to go into some weird place. And that is at the core of my career. I think of glass and the making of glass as something that a fine artist can do. And that is the whole heart of what I'm trying to tell you. So take a look. These things were very complicated and labor intensive. These pieces would take me and my assistants months, if not years, to make. So take a look. I mean, each one of the lead lines is shaved. It's like a brush stroke that a painter would do. And take a look at the how do you call it? The filo spinato. And,
barbed wire.
the barbed wire is, every little piece of the barbed wire is a separate piece of glass. The background is white and the actual barbed wire is transparent. You don't see it in this picture. The last piece that I'm going to show you of this is the portrait of Dorothy Sax, which will end up in the Young Museum in San Francisco with her collection, and George and Dorothy Sax collection. They built a wing to the Young Museum. This was my last portrait. It was in 1992. And I want to show you how crazy it was. I mean, it got to the place where this was like jewelry. Take a look at how this was built. You're looking at something that is this big, with all the lead shaved. This was insane. You know, so something had to happen. Oops, I tossed myself out of, okay, so now we go again to the Bullseye Glass Company. The Bullseye Glass Company, I will make a few comments because Dan made them to me a couple of evenings ago. And essentially it was 3 glass blowers. They all had worked with Harvey Littleton. And they put together this company to do stained glass. So they started rolling glass. They were obsessed with wanting to solve the issue of compatibility of glass. And the first artist they really worked with was a German artist, passed away, wonderful man, by the name of Klaus Moyer. And when Klaus was having a hard time, because 80% of his pieces would break when they cooled. So he was saying to Dan and the other members of the Bullseye Glass Company, I need compatible glass. I need a palette that will not break when it cools and it's mixed. And they said that they would work it out for him. His answer was, if they could not do it in Germany, you think 3 hippies in Portland can do it? You know, it's like, I have to say that Dan told me this in the cafeteria here. So I thought it was so perfect because I remember Klaus Moyer very well. And you know, he was very, very German. But the truth is that they did. So after 800 years, somebody came up with a palette of compatible colors. You ask Dan, who is here, but that created a whole new story. Here is one piece by Klaus Moyer, where you can see all of the colors are fused together. And all of his work, except for a few, probably survived after that. So I am invited to Bullseye to experiment with a new palette of compatible glass colors. I was very skeptical, but I went anyhow. You never turn down an invitation like that. But on the first time I was there working, I realized at once that the scientific and technical breakthrough could change the course of the history of stained glass and possibly even of painting. Of course, I'll never know the last one. The painting, if it changes, it's going to be 50 years from now, so I'm not going to be here. But I had multiple residences between the year of 1993 and 2002. Maybe 6 or 7 times I went. Now, I went, they told me that this was going to be compatible. I went and it said, okay, I'll take this drawing. And I took this drawing, which was a figure imagined in the sea, full of sea life. And I said to Rudy Rich, the head of R&D, okay, let's do this. And Rudy said, well, why don't you go back to San Francisco and come back in 2 weeks? And he wanted 2 weeks to figure out how to do what I presented to him. Now, what I'm about to show you is my first session, which the work is embarrassingly bad. In other words, I was very excited, and I also want to say this. What I decided to do is they have this kiln, which is actually burners that burn down on something, and they put, I think they put sheets of glass, and then they heat it up and they put it out and they iridize it. In other words, they spray some metal component to get the surface to iridize. That's what that tool was used for. So I went there and I said, I can't just do 1 piece a day. I have to do a lot of pieces. So how about if I do them one after the other in the iridizer? So it was a brutal session, but here it is. I didn't want to ruin my original drawing, so I took some pastels and I'm
interested in doing something that is not decorative. Think of glass as a very pictorial material. I don't care if my pieces come out ugly or beautiful. I care that they have some meaning. I want it to stay raw, like a sheet, so that it's like a drawing. It's like I ripped out a piece of paper and I did the drawing, and I say, that's what I want, so that people don't feel that this is cute.
Now, the man in the background, in my opinion, is the man, San Andreas is the man that knows most about color in glass in the world.
Glass is fire, so it moves. A line can be soft and melt into the piece. Dots can be soft and melt or can be hard. Millions of little effects can be reached when the glass is molten. And that's what's so exciting about it.
I caught on fire several times.
This making all these glasses compatible and fusing them together in all of these hundreds of ways is a totally new horizon in the making of glass. You know, totally new horizon. Because all of a sudden you can bring everything that is painting into glass, make it work, and add light.
So they were so bad, I didn't want to show any of the first generation. But this one, a detail of this one from the first generation, I could tolerate to show. But that's where I started. By a hot sheet of glass and putting stuff on it and trying to make it do something. But the fact that all of these colors could live on that piece of glass was absolutely shocking. On my next visit, I got a little bit better. I mean, I went home, I thought about it, and I said, what can I do? So I'm going to show you a couple of pieces, just one, without video. And here it is on the reheater, and here it is finished. This one is I have very few of this work in museums because nobody knows about this work, but a Japanese museum bought this piece. And this one as well. So eventually I graduated to working with a kiln, and my work got more sophisticated with time. So here is, I got a commission to do the last window of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, and it is my first big commission with fused glass, which I actually went to Bullseye to do. It is called The Gift, which is a galaxy inside of a Madonna. And take a look at this galaxy, because you'll see another galaxy in a few images a few years later, and it's a lot better. So I'm learning. I'm trying to develop a language. So the first big piece was what I call Gateway Tonight, and it was shown in the Franz Mayer Museum in Mexico City for the first time, and then went to Venice and the palace, in the Doge's palace, and went to Spain and La Fábrica de la Granja, Real Fábrica de San Ildefonso, and then it went to Portugal. So here is essentially what I consider a contemporary painting. There is no paint here. It's all glass. It's the blues, the spots, the edges, everything is glass. And so I fell in love. You know, I fell in love with this material. And eventually, when I went to Germany, I had to learn how to use a lot of enamel, because the big dome of Wind, Fire, and Time could not be done unless I had a lot of enamel. So I learned enamel, and then I went back to fusing, and when I went back to fusing, I began to incorporate doing some enamel painting with the glass. And to me, that was when I really completed the first cycle, because that was a language. Take a look at this piece, which has optical three-dimensional low relief on it. And it's a combination of painting. It's of course one of my series of Greek art imagined in the sea. But there it is. It's a long ways from that first piece that I took out of the iridizer. And you can see that this has nothing to do with stained glass anymore. This is like a watercolor. And you control the texture with the temperature, and you put the colors where you want them. You can make anything you want. So now we come to the Judson Studio. Okay, Judson Studio had gotten a huge project in Kansas City, but it was very unique. In other words, they landed the commission. Tim Carrey, the artist that was the head of design, had designed this bright project, which, by the way, was the size of a basketball court. And the problem that the studio had is that it was not, it wasn't an auditorium like a Cinerama or something. It was all in front of you, and it was a very brightly lit environment inside. It was like a concert hall. And so stained glass doesn't work in that. Stained glass is very dark. It depends on being in a dark space with a lot of light coming from behind, and there was a lot of light from the front. So Tim Carrey saw my work at a workshop, and he said, I'm gonna go and study with him. And so he came to study with me, and then he invited me to LA. And to make the long story short, they convinced me to drive this process and be the producer. Now, I want to say something about this. Judson Studio not only didn't have a staff not trained to do the project, they didn't even have enough electrical power going into that old building. So we had to buy kilns, train people, create a whole new world and culture to achieve this. And I want to thank David right now, specifically, for the fact that he was really this is a multi-million-dollar project, and I mean, he took a big chance on me. I mean, I told him I could do it. I told him of 161 panels, I knew how to do 160. And the one panel I did not know how to do is the face of Christ, because it was insane in the way Tim Carrey made it. It had, I don't know, 80 colors in it. And, but except for that, I told him, if you get the studio set up, you buy the kilns, I'll train Tim, I'll get it done. And so it's the first time I ever did something that was not my own. My daughter said, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, yes, because for once, I'll get to really pay attention to the glass and not be responsible for the art. So I'm not going to show a lot of work of this, but gives you a sense of the scale and the fact that a studio was put together and we produced it. And for me, what the experience was that having to train Tim and stay in front of him, I had to continuously invent new ways of doing things. So I would approach his drawing and I said, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I mean, you have a garden with 30 plants, and I'm not going to cut every leaf separately. So I had to figure out methodologies for how to get this done. And here is another, I did the galaxy myself. There were some parts of this that I did completely myself, and the other parts we did them together. And this is a galaxy that I did, let's say, 17 years before I did the other one. And I figured out a whole lot of techniques to achieve the look of the galaxy. I didn't do it with cutting individual pieces of glass. I did it by using the heat of the kiln. So, I'm going to give you maybe 10 pieces done with this technique. Most of them are mine, and some of them are not. Just so you can get a feel for what painting with glass and light is. So here is one piece I did in '94. They're very thick. They are 2.5 inches thick. So there is this dimension. If you're a painter, you are dealing with something that has depth. And before it takes a certain amount before it becomes a sculpture. But I would say it doesn't become a sculpture until it's 3 or 4 inches thick. Until 3 or 4 inches, you have that space to make a visual image. This piece that I did, it's a memory of my meditation teacher, shows the difference between a painting and a painting with glass. So the background is different shades of different shades of gray, of a very cloudy sky. This is called the premonition, by the way. And the figure of the Buddhist monk is black, completely black. There is no light that goes through it. And the rock covered with moss is very transparent. And so what is the effect when you are in front of this painting, in front of this glass piece? The light comes all to you through the rock. And that is completely different than you could ever get in a painting. Because you get literally the light come through the rock to you, and the painting and the black of the figure is totally blocking the light. Other pieces, particularly I like to show a detail of this one because this is what a Seurat painting can do. You know the French painter that painted everything with dots? Well, you can do this with glass, no problem whatsoever. This is what I call my true self-portrait. It's mutant. I use several techniques to do this piece. This is a piece by Tim Carrey. Same concept, a mutant, sort of a rough figure. I really like this piece that he did. But you can see it's very painterly, all done with glass. And he did a portrait of Dan Shore. And I think it's a masterpiece. And if you look at this piece close, it can tell you what glass can do. That is amazing. That is not an object. That is an image. And it's done with glass. And so it's related to a different family of this is related to portrait painting from certain periods. This is a self-portrait called Autumn, and I like, you get a feeling here. I show this picture because you can kind of feel the size and some physicality about it. And you can also see the texture. Finally, this is called Longing for Emptiness. And on this, I'm working with 3mm glass. It's very thin. And working with thin glass and get it to full fuse, it's very, very difficult. And it's called either Longing for Emptiness. I don't remember, I have it written down. But the last piece I want to show is a detail of a piece that is being made in the studio right now by an artist called Amir Fallah, and Persian. And I love what he does. Now remember, this is one piece of glass. Yes, on top of it there is a black line work, which is done exquisitely by one of the painters in the studio. But I'm trying to make the case you can work with many styles. So one of the things that happened is after the resurrection window, Tim Carrey started his own studio. He loved fusing and he didn't want to do anything else. So he started his own studio, and David Judson says, well, can you train my other artisans? So we together got a commission. Well, he got a commission for his studio in a mausoleum, and we selected some landscapes, and I had a session training the people just before COVID hit. And we could not have the party of the inauguration because they did such a beautiful job. But I want to tell you, it was one of the most joyous events. All of these people are so talented. They're such good painters. And they plunged into learning how to use this new technique. This is Indre Bileris. They plunged into learning how to do this technique with their whole heart. And it was tremendously satisfying for me. Here is Reed, who actually, I was impressed by this man, this young man. He had a very impressionistic thing to paint. You can see how proud he is when he finished. And he should be, because he defined the language for doing this piece. So here it is, the piece is finished, and we are examining it with David, and he really did an achievement. So there is no specific thing you're forced into. So to finish this section and just get into the last few minutes, which is the conclusion, I want to now say that David has embraced all of these new techniques, and he's directing his studio in connecting with contemporary artists with extraordinary projects. And I'm going to show you one which is being done as we speak in the studio with an artist by the name of James Jean. He's a Taiwanese, actually American, but born in Taiwan. He was a very well-known cartoonist that became a fine artist. So here I have 1 minute. And what you're seeing is a virtual reality of a pagoda project, which is extraordinary because it's an environment that is being built. Here are some renders. But what is extraordinary is the use of computers to achieve it. The structure is extraordinary. There is no structure. The panels get fitted with an edge and bolted together. The glass is the structure. So you can get a sense that this pagoda is a space that is movable. It can go from place to place, be mounted, and he has this sort of fairy tale world inside of it. But I want to basically say that the technology that is being used to fabricate this is very different than the technology from your typical stained glass. So here we go. We have a project which uses water jet machines, Rhino design technology, a whole different world from stained glass. So here we are. They're making some of it in the studio as we speak. And so the last bit of this talk is just 2 or 3 minutes, has to do with my activity. So I've learned all this stuff because I had people investing in me. And I realized that the kind of work I did at Bullseye Glass Company would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. I mean, just the materials that I put into that kiln, in and out, in and out, in and out. And of course, I know that Bullseye learned a lot from what I did, but I acquired all this because I had sponsors. First, the Bullseye Glass Company, then David Judson trusted me to do the COR project and then to train the people. So right now, my last effort is to figure a way on how to communicate all this. So on the 1st of March, I taught my first online course called Transformation. And probably in 3 months or 4 months, I'll do the second. And over the next year and a half, I hope to do a whole series of courses that leaves a track for anybody who wants to do a painting with glass will be able to do it. That is my goal. And after that, I'm free. So, you know, next month I'm 80, so I want to get done and pass this information on, and I want to be free and do my artwork again, which I still do, but I'm doing it in parallel with this big project. So we conclude with when we did these classes, I asked, my daughter is the filmmaker who does the filming and the production. Now she's got helpers to do the post-production. She did the post-production, but she did a trailer that I loved very much. It's 2 minutes and 39 seconds, and I think it tells the story. And this is the trailer, which is what students see when they're thinking if they want to study with me. Oops.
This is not about glass imitating painting. No. It's about light invading painting. Light is extraordinary. I mean, we take it for granted, but light gives life. Light is the fact that we exist. That is exactly what this is. It's almost as if the light goes into the viscera of the art piece. This material can give so many effects that can be so extraordinary and so joyous and so dark and so passionate, the contrast of colors and how they mix. It can be impressionistic, it can be graphic. So what is the key to this? Transform, 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 and keep transforming. When you think of a glass panel, you have to somehow imagine that it was inside a volcano. Heat is what makes the transformation of the glass happen. Fully follow the glass where it manifests itself. The transformation is that moment when something becomes something else. You not only have to be attuned to that, but then you have to learn how to control it. Glass is a beautiful material, but it's also very cruel. You can screw up so easily. You plunge forward, and then you don't know where the hell you are. This set of courses is designed in a way that you will not get lost. I have done thousands of fusings over the last 30 years. And what I'm offering to you is to streamline all the knowledge that I've acquired, and I'm offering it to you in a systematic way. This is the guts of the practice. This is the core of the practice. If you really look at the glass, you'll really be good as you make your images. Invest your joy, invest your imagination, invest your creativity to push it forward.
painting has to be done with glass. That's what I believe. If you have any questions, I'll gladly answer it, otherwise we're done.